Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. Supplier Satisfaction is Key to Better Payments, brought to you by IOFM and sponsored by Bottomline. We have just a few housekeeping notes to go over before we officially get started today. If you need any technical assistance, we first recommend refreshing your browser. If you continue to have technical questions or issues using the On24 platform, please use the Q&A box and we will respond as soon as we can. There will be no call-in number for today's session. To connect, you need to have access to either a computer, tablet, or cell phone audio. Everyone has automatically been muted today. If you happen to get disconnected at any time, you can log on again using the instructions provided in your webinar confirmation email. If you continue to have trouble, please email webinars@iofm.com and we will respond as soon as we can. For your convenience, everything in the webinar console is fully customizable. So you can move things around, resize the windows, and even turn on captions for this event. At the bottom of your console, you will find a resources box where you can download the slides as well as any additional content for today's presentation. Be prepared to answer 2 polling questions during the webinar. The polls will appear in the slides window during the presentation. Please choose from the multiple choice answers and hit submit. We would love to have your participation and insight today. You can ask a question at any time during the presentation by submitting them through the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to leave time at the end of the session to answer as many questions as time allows. And finally, this webinar will be recorded and you will receive a thank you email with the on-demand materials within 2 business days. And with all of that out of the way, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. We will hear from Bill Davis. Bill is the VP of Supplier Enrollment for Bottomline's Paymode X network. With nearly a decade of experience leading teams focused on fostering suppliers' return value to their business from network participation, Bill has had a front row seat to the many challenges faced by AR and AP teams on the automation journey. It's this experience that gives Bill a unique perspective on the value of solutions that benefit both AR and AP and lead to long-term sustainable returns on those investments. And we will also hear from Ramona Jankowski. Ramona is an internationally known research economist / thought leader and award-winning business journalist. She is a prolific writer on topics related to finance transformation and has covered the latest trends in finance automation for the past 30 years. Ramona became well known to the financial management community during her 10 years as president of CFO Alliance Canada, VP Research Financial Executives International Canada, and founding executive director of the Canadian Financial Executives Research Foundation. She has published countless articles, monographs, and white papers for international accounting associations / organizations and in leading professional magazines like Strategic Finance and CFO Magazine. You can read her archived monthly column in Accounting and Business Magazine. And at this time, I would like to welcome our speakers and hand the webinar over to Ramona. Welcome.
Thanks, Kelsey. Thanks, everyone, for joining today, for taking your time out of your very busy schedules. So today we're going to talk about how to efficiently automate your manual pay processes, but at the same time ensuring your suppliers are as happy as they possibly can be with your payment program. Now, this too complex, or they simply felt that the payer was pushing a workload onto them. So ultimately, we want to make sure that your automation program doesn't fail and that you don't permanently damage or frustrate your supplier relationships that you've been building for years. But before we get into all of that, I have a quick sidebar for you into why this should be top of mind for AP professionals in 2024. First of all, we know that economic headwinds are still blowing, albeit perhaps a little less gusty than companies are still fighting inflationary pressures. Commodity prices are still rising and estimated to be 0.5% higher this year. Borrowing costs remain higher than in the past 10 years, and we're not sure when the feds are going to be lowering interest rates. And for companies looking to increase their workforce this year, they can expect wages and benefits costs to rise by 5.2%. When it comes to supply chain, once again, although not as dramatically tight as during COVID, according to the Bank of International Settlements, supply chains are more complex now than they were during the pandemic and potentially more vulnerable, particularly in Asia. Meanwhile, shipping, insurance, and oil prices are climbing. Goldman Sachs recently forecasted that crude oil could potentially reach $100 a barrel this year, and that's primarily due to the ongoing terrorist attacks in the Red Sea shipping lanes. And we see what that disruption has done to shipping costs. For example, Freightos and Drewry global shipping cost indexes have risen by 150% and 180% respectively since December. And this supply chain disruption is once again causing port congestion and delaying goods from getting to their final destinations. So all of these factors will work to put the squeeze on the bottom line of many US companies this year. So for finance executives, this all points to finding every last dollar of savings, improving working capital to the max, and automating as many manual back office processes as possible. So now we all know that AP automation is a big win for companies when it comes to managing costs. And this trend isn't going away. For example, Bottomline recently surveyed more than 400 CFOs in the US and UK. And they found that 75% said they will be making revolutionizing their payments infrastructure a top priority. So for our audience, if you haven't already automated your AP, there's no doubt in my mind that you will be doing so in the very near future. And then here's again some data behind that. In the IOFM 2023 performance benchmarking study, 1/3 of respondents said manual processes were to blame for AP processes breaking down. It's therefore not surprising that almost 40% said automating their AP processes was a top concern. Again, research from the Bottomline shows that manually processing an invoice can cost up to $13 for every invoice, and end-to-end can take up to 3 weeks. And the cost of a check payment, they find, can range anywhere between $4 and $12. Now, I'm not sure where you folks might lie within that. The trend towards AP automation. AP teams recognize the potential strategic value they can bring to their companies. By eliminating the manual processes that AP teams are now burdened with, they can play a more strategic role in areas like forecasting and budgeting, detection and compliance, and ultimately managing and improving supplier relationships. So what's the common denominator in all those wins for AP? It's getting the supplier side of the equation right. And if it isn't right, your AP automation program can turn into an epic fail. Many companies have felt this pain, and again, there's data to support that. 51%, according to Mineral Tree, 51% of over 600 finance executives said that the top barrier to converting payments to digital was the supplier's willingness to accept them. At the same time, almost 1/3 said that another major pain point was that their AP program their AP team didn't have the capacity to contact and enroll vendors. So again, we add those two things together and the ROI of AP automation doesn't look good. So that's where I'll stop with the data for the moment and ask Bill to explain how using the right AP technology can eliminate need. First, can you tell us a bit about Bottomline?
Sure, Ramona, thank you. So at a high level, Bottomline is invested in helping businesses and financial institutions across the globe accelerate their business payments transformation, whether that be invoices or the payments themselves. Our innovative digital solutions are used worldwide to process billions of invoices and execute trillions of dollars worth of business payments each year. In the US specifically, Bottomline has the largest digital-only payments network, supporting over 550,000 suppliers and growing, and processing in excess of 400 billion annually. So we're incredibly familiar with the journey to AP automation and the many challenges of which you touched on just a few moments ago that folks can face on that path. Our focus is on helping both AP and AR overcome those challenges and realize the benefits that such transformation can provide.
So, Bill, we know companies are still worried about cost savings. We know they will eventually automate their AP. And we know that getting their suppliers buy-in can make or break their program. So when it comes to roadblocks and getting suppliers to enroll, what kind of questions are they asking you when it comes to automated payments?
Yeah, so for AP teams, when you think about suppliers' willingness and when we're talking to a supplier, the questions really come down to, what is this going to look like for me? Is it going to help my business, or is it going to make it harder to do business with you? And so we think about things like checks. A lot of companies are still using a high percentage of checks in their environment today. And checks, while outdated, are very familiar. They kind of have that same feel as maybe an old baby blanket, or maybe that favorite pair of jeans from college that just don't quite fit anymore, but you can't bring yourself to get rid of. And so suppliers are often hesitant about what that change might mean for them. They'll wonder, am I still going to be paid on time? Is it even possible to get paid faster? How secure is this platform? Will I have what I need to apply the payments when I finally receive them? Is it going to make my process take more time? And ultimately, is there a cost that I'm going to incur by doing this, whether that be a hard cost of a set transaction rate, or maybe more on the soft cost side if I have to go and make additional phone calls to get the information I need to process this payment? Those things can all combine to folks feeling like they aren't moving the needle fast enough in their digital acceleration programs. This can result in programs being initially successful and then falling back. It can also result in programs not taking off at the speed you'd like. Specifically when you think about the Paymode X network, we're focused on those things through providing value and benefits, and the stats kind of speak for themselves. From our perspective, our retention rates are 97% across the network of suppliers that sign up for payments. We're maintaining in those payment forms, and we see the cost to process those transactions on average being 7.5 times less to the supplier in a digital method than via the paper methods they were using before. And those suppliers are getting their money faster, which is even more important now. You touched on a lot of the economic headwinds that folks are facing, whether it's AP or AR. Those economic factors mean that getting the money today and applying it quickly is even more important. The one other piece that we continue to see in the market is that a lot of suppliers will feel like this is forced on them. A recent survey showed that 63% of suppliers felt that they were forced to accept at least one new payment method. When we hear the words forced, what that really says to us is that the supplier didn't feel like they had options that worked for them. And so when you think about how to make this journey work well, you have to be able to partner with somebody or offer a solution that has multiple methods to make these suppliers feel there's a method that works for them. And I'll share a quick little nugget that I found super valuable. I was talking with a supplier recently. They shared a story with me about how they were receiving payments 5 years ago. And they said, 5 years ago, I was completely automated, and now I'm not. And I said, well, hold on a second. Tell me more about that. That doesn't really make sense. We're all moving towards automation. Why are you less automated today than you were 5 years ago? And as it turns out, this specific supplier said they were fully automated because all of their payments were going by check to their lockbox. Everybody on the phone
Oh,
just
gee.
kind of took a little shock there, I'm sure, because checks aren't automated, right? Well, for that supplier, they're getting their checks into one location and they're getting a file from their bank, and it felt automated to them. Their pushback to adopting these new solutions is that they didn't feel like they had a pathway that worked for them to build automation in the same way they were used to receiving through that one single file. All of the work we've done around AP automation, both Bottomline and the industry in general over the last decade, has driven the amount of payments that these suppliers are receiving from various different sources to an extreme level, and not one payment looks like the other from these different providers that are out there. And so it's a real pain point and a real thing we need to solve for is from when you think about from an AP team perspective to say, is the solution that I'm offering flexible to my vendors so that they don't feel like I'm forcing them to do something that they don't want to do?
Okay, that's a lot of information to take in. I thank you for giving us some of those details around those statistics. That's quite shocking that 63% of businesses say they were forced to accept this new payment method. I can't imagine that's great for building supplier relationships in the long run. But what about other things like risk areas resulting from manual processes, fraud, etc.? I'd like to ask you about those, but I do see that we've got a poll coming up. So let's ask our audience exactly where they sit in terms of their digital payments. And our poll questions are, what percentage of your payments are made via means like ACH and card? Is it none of them, less than 25%, 25% to 50%, or 50% to 100%? So we'll give the folks about a minute to answer those questions for us. In the meantime, while we're waiting for those results, what are AP teams who are still dealing with a lot of paper? What type of issues do they have around perhaps fraud into payments or general loss and efficiency? And can you also talk to that from the supplier's perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And a quick thank you for the great participation on this poll, everybody. Ramona and I have a little side bet going to see where this one lands. So I appreciate the intense participation that I'm seeing. Thank you. So, simply put, Ramona, this whole process is just a ton of work. You and I both just highlighted some factors that really contribute to this. On top of that, companies are also paying for the cost of medical supplies to solve paper cuts and the dangers of sick time from licking your fingers during flu season so you can get a better grip on the top of the paper. I'm just kidding. Kidding aside, we regularly hear from prospective customers that they're increasingly concerned with a couple of major areas. You'll see each of them kind of highlighted on our next slide, but it really comes down to one of these four things as generally the largest driver for folks when they think about a payments program and automating that. There's an impact both from the AP teams and from AR teams, both financially due to delays and lost revenue, but also reputationally for fraud losses. We continue to see really staggering stats year over year about the amount of business fraud and the more sophisticated that those attempts begin to get. And so it's a big concern for businesses. And doing that in-house often opens you up to some of the pitfalls that you can avoid when you're part of a larger network where you sort of have a joint fraud prevention taking place. Not only that, but the time that these manual processes take. You think about the time, we often think about the time it takes to cut a check, but often our first thoughts don't go to also the time it takes to maintain accurate records of supplier information in order to be even able to cut that check. You need to make sure you have accurate address and PO box information to be able to maintain those as they change. If you're trying to run your own in-house ACH program, you might be maintaining bank account information for your customers, which is a whole new level of security that you have to implement and time that it takes to make sure that's secure. Beyond that, once the check leaves the building, it sort of enters this void. Maybe you have a tracking number because you paid extra to track that payment, but you're counting on it to be delivered in a tiny little envelope across the country, and you're counting on it to get there on time so that you're not late on making your payments. It's very inefficient and it lacks visibility both for yourself and for your customer, your vendor that you're trying to pay. all of those things contribute to a real lack of efficiency. The amount of time spent managing all of those things is astronomical for a lot of organizations. And some folks will have different pain points where maybe one of those things takes more time than the other. But when you add it all up, the one thing every organization has in common is that the combination of those things take a lot of their time away from things that could be used to drive additional revenue or insights for their business to run smoother.
Okay, let's see what our poll results are now. I believe quite a number of folks were able to answer that for us. Let's see how we're doing on our side bet there, Bill. Okay, so
Wow.
what percentage of your payments are yeah. So nobody has zero payments by ACH and card. That's good news. 13.8%, less than 25%, 26%, 25 to 50%, and 60% to 50 to 100%. Okay, Bill, how are you seeing this played out in the market? Is this similar to what you're finding generally? 60%?
You got a really good audience on the phone. This is amazing. What I see actually generally when you poll an audience is a lot of folks end up in that 25 to 50 range. I'd be really interested to see if we put a 50 to 75 marker in this slide the next time we do it for an audience like this. I'm so happy to see that people are creeping forward. And the thing that makes my heart the warmest is that no one answered none of them. So it means you all care about and have started this journey, which is super exciting. It's providing a lot of value for both your organization and your customers as you go forward.
So let's see what some of the biggest challenges were for those folks who are, they're quite well automated, 60%, 50 to 100%. That's quite far along the curve. But I'm curious what their greatest challenges were in enrolling, in their getting their suppliers on board and what other issues they may have. So let's check out our next poll. So we're asking our audience what the greatest challenge is when it comes to supplier payments. Is it enrolling and retaining suppliers, overcoming fee-based objections, finding the right payment type, or earning rebates and realizing better efficiency? So again, we'll give it a couple of minutes for folks to answer those questions. But while we wait, what do you see around any of those challenges, again, in the market? And let's talk specifically maybe about supplier pushback to enrollment. Do you see that maybe the AR teams of the suppliers are maybe not as technological savvy as they need to be to accept ACH or card payments? Or maybe they just don't have the capacity to onboard because it's too complex? What are you seeing in terms of pushback specifically?
Yeah, thanks, Ramona. I'm really interested to see how this poll turns out. I think in any payments program, you have some combination of all of these things at play because your vendor file is simply not a one size fits all. You're often going to find that there's a mix of all of these things, and they'll be most important to one supplier, won't be important to another. And so that's also the magic of what you need to do to accomplish a successful payments program is you need a payments network and a payments program that enables you to solve all of these things, which is hard. And so when you're looking for a solution that's going to work for your suppliers, the key is it has to help them accomplish a goal also. They're trying to get paid. The hardest part of their day, they don't want to be applying your payment. They want it to be convincing you to buy what you bought from them in the first place. And so you need to find a solution that's going to be able to offer ease of use, both at the time of initial setup and also on subsequent payments. That's going to really help with adoption. Folks don't want to use something that's hard to use or that they go, every time they have to click into it. It should feel like an easy part of their day or week. You're going to need a solution that can handle multiple payment options to fit your many different suppliers. When you think about what's the right payment type for this supplier, you're going to find that you're not going to be able to pick one thing and have that work for everybody. You're going to have some suppliers who might be a great fit and might really appreciate accepting a credit card payment from you because they value that. You're going to find other folks that are going to want ACH. And frankly, you're going to have some folks who are really going to resist you and want to still process checks. So you need to find a partner that can help you solve all of those things. And those can vary from the person you pay once every couple of months to the company that you're paying 5 times a week. And all the way from the company that you pay small dollar payments to ones that you make multi-million-dollar payments to. So you need a solution that works across all of that. Each of those suppliers is going to have different things around cost factors, right? When you think about these payment programs out there and processing, on a card, for instance, that rate might matter to that supplier. So you're going to have suppliers that will accept a card up to a certain dollar amount, but may not beyond that. You need to have solutions that can have a fit for those types of suppliers as well. Beyond that, in terms of providing real value to your suppliers, which is what's going to drive adoption and keep them retained long term, they need to be able to have a solution that can fit and or enhance their current AR process and help them get to their goals. We'll have lots of opportunities today to talk about why AR wants to automate, but being part of that journey for them is a big lift that you can give them as your AP automation tool.
Okay, so let's see our results of this poll. I'm very curious to see what the major pain point is. And again, okay, it's tied between enrolling and retaining suppliers at 32% and overcoming fee-based objections at 33.8%. Do you find that surprising, Bill? Does that sort of match up with what you're seeing in the market? I'm a little surprised.
It does match up.
Okay.
I think when you think about onboarding suppliers, we just talked at the start of our presentation about the different economic factors that are coming at teams from AP, from all these different sources. You simply don't have time to do this yourself as an AP team. It pulls you away from other critical tasks, and we're not operating in an environment where as a AP director or a CFO, you can very easily justify adding 12 people to your team just to do this effort. And so that enrolling of suppliers is a big lift for a lot of organizations. Beyond that, retaining them is even harder sometimes. You might be able to initially onboard, but if your solution that you've onboarded them to doesn't provide them real value back, what ends up happening is they feel those economic pressures and they start to see that they're, what costs they're absorbing, which is our number 2 here, to be able to accept these different forms of payments. They begin to push back and to leave those programs because they don't see a real ROI and they don't have free money to throw around on solutions that don't benefit them. And so it's super important as people look at solutions in the marketplace, whether they're looking at a solution like Bottomline's Paymode X or other solutions out there, you need a solution that drives real value to your suppliers, and you need a real partner that's going to help you deliver that to them.
So in terms of how you can solve some of these problems, let's go through. You recommend 3 ways to make a better supplier experience, and that is outsource, digitize, and improve. Can you talk to what exactly you mean by outsourcing enrollment, and how does that work with your company, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is what I live and breathe every day. So I'm very passionate about this topic. It's also one of the biggest differentiators in your program as you begin to look at folks in the market who provide solutions similar to what we do. This is one of those areas that's going to look and feel very different provider to provider. You're going to start seeing large spread of what they do, how they approach this, and like what aspects of it they're willing to take on for your team. From a Bottomline perspective, we pride ourselves on becoming a true partner in this effort. Our team, our goal is to become an extension of your team and your message to your supplier community. We're going to start to do that by first working with you to analyze your full supplier file, and we'll provide recommendations to you based on our network insights. Those 550,000 plus vendors that participate in our network. What do we know about them and their acceptance preferences? From there, we're going to leverage our years of experience to layer on additional structure around your program. We'll make some recommendations to you about what we think a successful program might look like and how you might begin to sort out what payment types are great fits for different types of payments and different types of suppliers. From there, we'll craft specific messaging along with your team to say, how do we want to share that message with these suppliers? And then we'll deliver that on your behalf, which is the hardest part. You might come up with great messaging around your payments program, but then how are you going to successfully deliver it to the audience of thousands of suppliers? So we have a large team of folks that get engaged to do that and deliver the content via both phone and email outreach to support not only the initial enrollment, any questions they have along the way. That could be a question at time of sign up, something as simple as like, how do I enter my bank account correctly? To something more complex, like how do I integrate this file output into my ERP on the back end so that I don't have to call my customer and ask them for an invoice number every time.
Right.
And then ongoing support, right? We provide ongoing support. It's going to be something that's critical for your payments program as well. Folks are going to have questions post the go live of your program. They need to have a place to call, a place to contact, a place to chat to get those answers quickly. And so they're not calling into your AP team for those answers. Your team likely isn't large enough to support inquiries from all of your vendors as you embark on a payments program without significant stress. And that's one of the biggest burdens that a partner should be able to relieve from you.
So your second way to improve the supplier experience was to digitize. Can you go a little bit further into how you can help the suppliers digitize through ACH and card?
Yeah, so AR teams are really sort of at the tail end of the automation journey in lots of organizations. The journey to automate payments started with AP, and a lot of solutions out there don't factor in how to help those suppliers also begin their automation journey. They're very AP focused, which is great for automating your AP until you get to the point of needing to land payments consistently for your suppliers. And so we're going to talk a little bit in my next slide about the different ways that we help suppliers do that. But when we think about other things that contribute to this positive experience, right, there's a couple of other really important things that you can think about as a payer organization on how you're going to increase your adoption rates across your supplier platform. The first thing is to find the right partner. You need to identify a partner, whether it's a partner like Bottomline Technologies and Paymode X or another, that's going to make sense for you, that's going to provide that real value. It's also incredibly important that you understand how they're going to be contacting your suppliers and the level of education that the people doing that contact have about AR. You want somebody who can engage in a very intelligent conversation with your suppliers about AR at whatever level they're at. You're going to have suppliers that are multinationals that have a very sophisticated AR. That conversation is very different than Joe's flower shop that's been in small business for 45 years and doesn't have the same technology to be able to automate their payments posting. The second thing that we always recommend is having a payment strategy. If you don't have one today, it's definitely something we work with folks on crafting. But a lot of folks we see are starting to build these today, right? What I mean by a payment strategy is you want to have a method of incentivizing your desired outcome or disincentivizing away from your undesired outcome. A lot of folks likely attended this call today because they want to automate their payables, which means they probably want to make as many payments via credit card to drive rebate as much as they can. Great. Something like paying those suppliers faster will help in a way that won't feel pressured by your suppliers. Most folks, and it looks like we had nobody that has none of their payments, but most folks probably don't like cutting checks. I can tell by that poll. And so in a situation like that, you may want to disincentivize check as a fallback option. By way of a really quick example, there's a customer that we work with. Their payment strategy, right, is I'm going to pay card payments to my card suppliers on immediately upon approval of a non-discrepant invoice. So we've stamped it. It's yes, we know we need to pay that. We're going to pay it now. We're not going to hold the funds. For anybody that we're paying at an ACH where we can also earn a rebate on our ACH, we're going to pay it net 15. Anybody we're paying just as a ACH that we don't earn a rebate on, we're going to pay them at terms. That's their incentive. And then, hey, if you still want to receive a check, we really don't like cutting checks here. We do our check run every 120 days. So we'll approve your invoice, and then whenever that next check run is, that's when you'll be a part of it. So it could be at terms, it could be 120 days from now. And so that's a strategy that works really well that says to your supplier community, hey, like, we know that we want these payment methods to work in this order, and we're willing to partner with you to provide you even additional incentive to pick the one that we want. We see that be very successful.
So what sort of tools does Paymode offer to AR department teams, AR departments, to help them through this new payment process with their payers?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And I've touched on it a couple of times to make sure you're providing real value to your suppliers. I'm very passionate about this because I work with suppliers every day. But in terms of Bottomline specifically, what we're doing for those suppliers is we're helping them access the information they need, whether it be to send invoices or to apply those payments post receipt of payment in a way that's flexible and efficient for them at whatever level they're at, right? So we gave the multinational example, and we gave Joe's Flower Shop just a moment ago. Like, Joe's Flower Shop, Joe might really care that he gets a notification on his mobile device that he's been paid and what the invoice is for. That may be all Joe cares about. We can help Joe with that. The multinational organization, on the other hand, might need to see a file output on a nightly basis in a very specific format that can be automatically grabbed by their accounting software and applied without somebody touching that. And we have lots of examples of vendors that we're helping do that with, where they're seeing posting rates of, without manual intervention, in the 95+% of their payments range through us. And so that for us is the real magic, is providing that value to those suppliers across like the span of where they fall, because they're not on the same place in the automation journey. They likely didn't answer none of these to their question either. They're getting payments by check, they're getting payments by ACH, by card, lots of different formats. And our goal is to kind of make that noise make sense for the supplier.
Okay, so we've talked through a number of issues around costs and risks associated with manual processes. We've also looked at what some of the roadblocks are to enrolling suppliers, and how we can help overcome that. And there's other benefits that I'm sure that you've not yet mentioned, and this evolves around the strategic contribution AP can make to their company. And that's basically turning from AP, from a cost center to a revenue driver. And you mentioned rebates. So I'd like to explore that a little bit more, how using Paymode can actually drive the strategic agenda of the AP department. So we can talk about new revenue, and we can talk about new efficiencies around that.
Yeah, and a wonderful question. And I think everybody on this call, because we're in 2024 now, has probably seen the turn your AP from a cost center into a profit center mailer that everybody uses, right? It's really catchy, but it's true, right? So when you think about rebates, what we often find is that folks are under leveraging their ability to generate those, whether it be through missing timelines and windows on how efficient they can be to get a payment out the door in order to have it qualify for that vendor to accept at a certain payment level that generates a rebate back, or even early pay discounts for that matter. The efficiencies really get lost, and you can't make some of those timelines. But when you think about rebates, you're really talking about card, and then also through Paymode, there's a premium ACH option that supplements your card rebate that provides a rebate on ACH. And so that's a differentiator for us as well that really helps us kind of broaden the ability to generate rebate across your population. Card programs have been around for a while. I'm sure a lot of folks on this call have tried them. Some folks have probably had great success. Other folks have had limited success. It's really, again, about having a platform that drives a broad base of acceptance across many different payment types, where you can maximize your ability to generate rebate, whether that's from your card or your ACH, and allows you to put money back into your organization, just in terms of straight dollars on the balance sheet, which is awesome. Everybody loves that. The part that's a little harder to calculate, but arguably is sometimes even more impactful, is just the efficiencies that you can get by moving to a digital process. The combination of automating your payments and your invoices can be really magical for some folks. Think about in your head for a moment, if you can imagine, you're in the middle of a normal week, maybe it's even audit week, and you get an invoice in. That incoming invoice gets perfectly matched to the purchase order for which it belongs via OCR capabilities, sent along to the correct approvers. They approve it. It queues it up for your payment approval process, and no one from your team has had to touch it. That's pretty awesome. If you push that a little bit further and you say, hey, went out, it's going to go out as a card payment and I get to earn rebate, like everybody's happy, right? So those things combined can have a really big impact on your organization. And you can use that time that you get from automating those processes, not to, spend doing more manual steps, but to really get more strategic about how you're thinking about your AP. What's AP's contribution to the business? How can you then leverage that time back into your organization to drive more meaningful outputs than just passing pieces of paper and chasing down emails?
Right. So if we could talk a little bit more about some of the back-end processes, how do we connect Paymode X to the rest of our financial accounting systems? So I know the finance folks are always concerned about making things as seamless as possible.
Yeah. So we should put a poll on here and ask people to just fill in what ERP system they're using. I bet it's all different. So that's kind of the point, though. So with Paymode X, like there's a variety of ways to connect it into your infrastructure, whether that is through an ERP connector to a standard ERP that might be out there, right? Maybe you're using an MRI configuration, connect right in with a connector, or we'll do some custom implementation where we're working with your team to really take in a file transfer process that's a one-time setup and gets configured and you're ready to go. There's a full, if you leave today, you love this type of technology, you look at all your options, you choose Paymode X, there's a full implementation that you'll go through with our implementations team, and they'll connect all the dots for you so it's a seamless process. Not one of those is alike because nobody on this call has the same output file.
Right. So
which can be a challenge if you don't have a good partner to work with on how to get that set up and implemented. There's not a lot of off-the-shelf technology in this space that the team here today can go and grab.
So what sort of training do you provide around your system? You mentioned an implementation team. Is that the same team as the folks that would help people actually run this at the end of the day?
Sure. So I mentioned earlier, we're really engaged in being a true partner in your business, right? So there's an implementation that everybody goes through if they signed up for Paymode X. That implementations team is going to be with that organization for 60, 90 days from the start of their program. Usually most folks, after they process their first or second payment run, have a really good handle on how everything works. It's pretty simple technology, pretty easy to get a user-friendly. But that team's there to answer those questions, to train any adjacent teams that maybe we didn't think about the first time that we started the implementation. Oftentimes, you'll have an AP lead or a controller team say, hey, we want to automate our AP. And then after that, different teams get brought in for every touch point. And so we'll go through very specific training with each of those teams on their functions and roles. And then you have an account management team that carries forward with you for the life of your program that's there for when a new person comes on, if you need to do knowledge transfer that didn't happen effectively between the person who left that role or questions. And their role is really to make sure that you're successful for the lifetime of your program. So that's how we do it, is really in a partnership model.
Now, do you find that
And I think, sorry to interrupt, I think you cut out for a second, Ramona. Can you try turning your camera off? And that should open up some bandwidth.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, apologies for that. Yeah, so the question was, do you find that AP teams are, and do you have any recommendations around how an AP director can start those conversations around automation and why they're doing that in their company?
Sure. So I can share from experience that from our customers, and then also this is the space my mother has made her career in, so I have some really personal experience as well having these conversations with her. What we always seem to find is that the things that are super manual in this job are actually the things that are frustrating for these teams. Most folks in AP teams don't wake up every morning and say, man, I want to get a whole check stack signed today and licked envelopes and sent out in the mail. And
Right.
so oftentimes this can be a real morale boost when done the right way for those teams to say, hey, instead of these really frustrating manual things that always slow us down and get in our way, we're going to solve those. And how we're going to redirect our time is these 2 or 3 strategic initiatives. They're going to make X, Y, or Z difference in our business. And so my coaching to AP professionals and AP directors that are rolling this out to their teams is have a clear vision for how you're going to reallocate that time and get people excited about it, because it is exciting. The manual processes are always the things that people don't love about this job.
So we do have some questions from the audience. I want to make sure I get to a couple of those. So Amber asks, I'm finding that most payment solution companies are not offering foreign payments or wires, nor offering bank verification for foreign payments. Is this something that is on the horizon?
Sure. So Amber, great question. And we would also probably coach you that these payments are tricky. The reason that they are tricky is often around the banking verification that you hit on. And it's really because the systems aren't connected. And so when you think about how to properly do bank verification, there's actually a lot of great tools out there in the marketplace for US financial institutions, and it's a big focus area in growth. I do think, in my personal opinion, that as we become an even more connected financial systems world, those things will start to come together and it'll become easier to validate foreign bank accounts. Frankly, and those of you on the phone in AP probably already know this, but like the rest of the world outside of the US is actually further along in the digital payments journey than we are. So I think when we catch up, those things will get connected. But today, that is certainly a challenge and a problem. We do certainly offer services that help companies get those out, and there's adjacent services you can tag onto here, but you're going to find that foreign payments and foreign bank account validation is a challenge for most folks.
Okay, and then another question from our folks. Maggie asks, what can I do if the pushback against company card usage is coming from my company? Many vendors, especially utility vendors, will not accept ACH, but will accept a credit card or a check. This is where the bulk of our check payments are coming from.
Sure. Maggie, thank you for the question. Pushback against card usage coming from inside of your company is a tough one. I'll tackle first the utility vendors, and then I'll kind of come back to that as a general commentary. You're exactly right. The utility vendors usually will have a portal that they'll accept card. ACH is tricky for these utility vendors, oftentimes because they're going to require account numbers, and it doesn't come across the best inside of a lot of standard ACH program remittance lines. For us, what we would advise you on this is if you can pay them with a credit card, that is 100% the best way to go. But if you can't, it usually means a conversation with the utility customer that our team would take on to say, hey, like, we understand your concerns around ACH. Tell us a little bit more about your specific concerns. And is there something that we can do in terms of a file or making sure that you have the right remittance to apply your payments? You'll see this also outside of utility payments when you get into really large multinational corporations you might be doing business with. If they have their own payment portal, and it really ties back to those challenges with AR and not wanting to receive payments in 50 different formats. They want their standard format. And so if they have the leverage, like a utility company might, to drive you to use their portal, they're going to try to do that as the very first option. A conversation is generally the best way to go. There's lots of card payment options in this where you can do things like proxy payment that are very helpful. Getting your company on board with card is the biggest hurdle there. What we have consistently found inside of companies where there's pushback on a card program or an ACH program And I don't know for sure if this is the exact pushback you're seeing, but what we see usually is, well, we don't want our vendors to pay a fee. And so in my mind, and what we try to engage in conversations as, is pretty narrow viewpoint on that. It's what their spirit of that is we don't want to make the cost greater for our customers to do business with us, or for our vendors to do business with us. And I totally align to that. What really gets missed there, though, is that if they have a process around that, or they can make one, there's an ROI for them to gain from accepting some of these payment types. And so accepting that card might actually be better for that vendor organization. And you don't really get a chance to know that until you've asked, until you've had that conversation. And so what we encourage folks to do is, that might be a situation where, like, you're not going to require them to take a credit card, but having a card program and having it available as an option allows vendors to select that if in fact it is actually better for their organization from a cost perspective. And there's lots of data out there, you can find it from all the big card companies, that shows all the ways that it actually can be better.
Okay, and we have one last question from John. What does a good supplier enrollment process look like? And how do I know when I've got it?
Yeah, so John, great question. Thank you for that. For me, it's about making sure that your supplier enablement team, whether that's internal, external, whether you're evaluating partners, can they have those intelligent AR conversations? Can they have a conversation with an AR professional where they're actually caring about their needs? They're hearing what has to fit to work for them, and they can offer solutions based on the product they have that actually fit those needs. You'll see in the market where people will blindly dial, for lack of better phrasing, and just, hey, will you accept this credit card? Hey, will you accept this credit card? Hey, will you accept this credit card? That's not a good supplier experience. I've consistently found that a good supplier experience starts with an explanation of what goals the AP team is trying to accomplish, and then flows into some open-ended questions about how the payments process is going today in the form of payment that they're receiving, and then what would it look like for the organization to accept one of these methods that we're moving to, in order to best leverage the benefits and value on both sides of the equation. If you find a team that can have that conversation and can sound intelligent doing it, you've got the start to a winning program.
Okay, and that comes to the end of our questions from the audience. So I'd like to say thanks to Bill for all these great insights you've been providing today. It's absolutely fascinating. Times are changing really fast, and folks need to really get with the right partner to make sure they're capturing all the benefits they possibly can, because things aren't going to get easier in the economy. I don't know if they ever do, but cost management is always going to be top of line for the CFOs, and AP automation is a big win. So great to hear all those insights from you. And I encourage anyone out there to check out the IOFM website for other insights around AP automation, and to contact Bill with any further questions. So thanks everyone for joining us today. And I believe Kelsey has a few housekeeping items she'd now like to talk to you about.
Yes, I just have a few housekeeping notes to go over before we officially close out today. If you could please fill out the short evaluation form that will appear on the webinar console shortly. This will help us better serve your needs in future webinars. And as a reminder, the on-demand materials will be emailed to everyone within 2 business days. And this will include a PDF of the slides, as well as the link to the recording of today's presentation. And thank you again to Bill and Ramona for a great presentation today. And thank you to all of our attendees for taking the time out of your busy days to join us. This webinar was brought to you by IOFM and sponsored by Bottomline. Thank you all, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.